Okay, folks, back here to play with some more ArcGIS stuff. This is going to be a pretty straightforward lecture and exercise. I'm going to do anything too radical compared to what you've been doing already, but I want to show a few things, give you a little more practice in making these basic maps, doing some basic analysis stuff here. So let's get moving. I've also put in Canvas a brief description of what I'm expecting of you guys. And you may have looked through this already, but it also may not have made that much sense to you as you did, in fact, look through it. So I'm going to go through this, explain it to you, show you the basic idea, and then turn you loose to have something attractive at the end of this that you can post to Canvas. So as you can see here, the data we're going to be using, it's in this US POP folder. So you go into Files and Data, and then US POP. And remember, if you click these three dots here, left click once, hit Download. We'll bring this up. I'm going to hit Save. And I'm going to look here in my Downloads folder. And again, I'm using Firefox. You may be using another browser. It may be a little bit different, but should be a similar process here. I'm going to go to Data Export. I'll click on that folder to bring it up. Let me resize some stuff. And in fact, what I'm going to do, I'm going to right click, hit cut. I'm going to go into my documents, ArcGIS, and I'll right click and paste. And that way I have the data in a place where I know where it is. I'm deliberately saving it here and not filling up my downloads folder. I'm going to right click here because it's a zip file. Go to 7-zip. I will just do extract here. And there you go. We get this US_POP folder. And I'm going to right click and delete that so I don't get confused. Also double click in here to see what we've got. And you can see that we have a couple of shape files that we'll be dealing with. Pretty straightforward stuff here. So let's bring this into ArcMap so we can actually make sense of it. And okay, we have this. I'm going to expand that. And through catalog, you can see in that default home documents ArcGIS, I've got my US POP right there. If you already had it open while you were doing that, you might not see it. So if you don't see it in there, remember, right click and hit refresh, and that will make it go back and look at everything and post everything that's available to you. Okay, and so in here, we have this states shapefile. It's the United States. And then we have this other countries to give some background stuff. You never want to have it where you just have the United States just floating. I think if you can avoid it, sometimes it's good to have those other countries next to it so it doesn't look weird. It's not always the case, but that's what we're going to do today. Okay, so we have our stuff here. Let me resize it. What we want to do ultimately is have a map that shows population densities by state for the entire United States. And population density means something very specific. So population just means, how many people live in a state like Alaska or California or wherever. That can be useful, but when you're comparing all of the states in the entire country, sometimes that can be misleading, right? To get a sense of how many people are actually there in the space itself. So population density is a way to account for this, where we take that raw number that raw population number. We divide it by the size of the state itself, right? To kind of get a sense of how many people live in there compared to the actual size of the state. In some cases, it might be the case that the bigger states, the ones with the largest size, would have the most people because you could just fit more people in there. But if we do this population density thing, we can see kind of how tightly packed in those people are, how spread out they are. It gives us a better sense of like how many people live within the state. Okay, so that's what we're going to be working on. And to do that, we're going to need some information, on population density. And so if you right-click on states over here in the table of contents, go to Open Attribute Table. Sorry, mine is keeps dragging onto the other monitor that I'm using. I tell you what, I'll just put it right here. If we look at this in here, we have a lot of great data attached to these state files. So we have the state name itself. We can see we start with Hawaii. Here we have that state abbreviation. We have the population in the year 2000 from that year 2000 census, and we have the population from the 2010 census. We do this every 10 years. So in 2020, we'll have another big census where we get a sense of how many people are living in the state. We also have a lot of demographic data, things like race in here, white, black. It's not the greatest demographic data. There's a lot of nuance that's lost. For example, Asian means a lot of stuff, right? That means people from India, it means people from China, Thailand, so all over what we consider to be Asia. So that's a very complex number. So there's only so much you can do with that kind of stuff. But we have these numbers here. We also have males, females, and so on, different age groups. So there's a lot of stuff. And if we scroll over here, you see toward the end, we have the square mileage of that state. So of Hawaii in this case. So we have the size and we have the population. We'll use that 2010 number because it's more recent. And so we're able to create something based on population density. So let's close that and right click on states and now go into properties. That mine's thinking, so I'll wait. This is a good time to remind you to save early, save often, just in case it crashes when you're doing something even seemingly simple like that. But in here, let's go to the Symbology tab and then go down to the Quantities section right here and leave it on graduated colors. And we played with this before, but I'm going to show you how to take it a little bit further right here. Value is going to be our population 2010. Okay, and in fact, let's get it off this gross color scheme that worked for carbon emissions, but let's find something a little more pleasant for now. So you can see we have things like California, Texas, Florida. These have a darker color because they have more people living in there. Things like Wyoming, up here in Alaska, Hawaii, they have less people living there, so they get that lighter shade of green, right? Pretty straightforward. But normalization, this option right here, it's kind of way of saying, take this value and divide it by this other thing, okay? So in here, we can scroll down. Anything that's a number, we have access to. So you notice things like state name, it's not an option because you can't divide a number by a word, right? But anything that's a number, we can use. And sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. So you have to really do the thinking here. The computer doesn't know what's a good value to use. It's just showing you all of the possible number fields. We're going to use square miles. Now, as we do that, these numbers change right away. And if I hit apply, you can see that this stuff changes right here. All right, Texas got a little lighter in color. We got a little lighter, but we're still doing pretty well. Whereas in New England, you see a lot of these numbers get darker. So there's a slight change. And in fact, this color scheme isn't the most ideal to really show that difference, to have this stuff stand out. So play around with that as well, so you get a sense of what what would look good in here. So here I have all of these states now being designated by population density, right? Not just population itself. This also looks pretty good. We can, if you recall, I think I showed you guys this. If you don't like the way it's showing this stuff, go into Format Labels, and you can change this, like number of decimal places. Can drop that down to 1 because it really doesn't matter any deeper than that, and hit OK, and that just kind of cleans up our numbers. I can hit apply, and that'll change some of the stuff there. So that's a way to kind of clean up this stuff. And then we hit OK, and you can get this color scheme where you want it. You can I just left click on that. You can change these other countries to something very neutral, so we don't even notice them. In fact, let's see if I do it lighter like that. Again, play around with this stuff. I'm going to drag that underneath too, so it pops out a little bit. So there, we've got some population density stuff shown. So far, so good. And in fact, let's go over to Layout View. I'm going to right click here, go to Page and Print Setup, change this to Landscape. That's Scale Map Elements. It's a little easier to drag around. Okay, so we have this, and if I zoom in, this is pretty hideous. I'm not going to lie. That's a god-awful map, and we can fix that, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We really have two issues here. Number one, our coordinate system / projection is terrible, so we want to fix that. And then number two, having Alaska here and Hawaii over here, in keeping these here, showing them where they are in space compared to the United States, it means the actual contiguous United States has to be smaller, has to be placed over to the side. We're going to fix that as well. So the first thing that you need to do is to figure out that coordinate system, and right click on layers up here, and this is so we're clear. I can't remember if I mentioned this before. We have our table of contents here. We have our actual layers or feature classes, so the states and the other countries' shapefiles that we brought in. And then where it says layers, this is our data frame, meaning anything we bring in terms of shapefiles, data files, it's going to come in to this specific data frame. So if I add something else, it will draw it on top of these data that we have right here, right? So that's the idea. Now, if we right click on this and go to properties, this is where we can change that coordinate system, which we've played with in the past. And if we scroll down, these are all, this open one, and this is all in geographic coordinate systems. We want to get into the projected coordinate systems, and one reason for this is, quite frankly, all this geographic stuff, it's going to look like this. It just doesn't look good. You have incredible distortion with Alaska. Greenland, just so you know, Greenland up here is supposed to be the same size as Mexico, and it's not. It's much bigger and stretched out. So things just kind of look weird in that regard. Also, Maine kind of droops down. The contiguous United States just looks kind of stretched out and droopy and sad. We don't want that. Only communists want that. We're going to find something that looks good. Dang it. We're going to find a nice patriotic coordinate system here. And so we're going to find that in this projected coordinate systems. Again, with ESRI's concept, they lump together coordinate systems and projections and datums and all this stuff into one file. And then in here, these folders, they give us kind of a clue as to what they're going to be when we just read the name. These world coordinate systems, projected coordinate systems, are good if we're making a map of the world, not necessarily the best thing for making a map of the United States, right? So you want to look through here, think about what we have. And continental be a good start, and North America specifically. And I'm not going to actually change these. I want you guys to take your time, play around with this, find something that looks good. But also keep in mind as you're reading through here, this first one, Alaska Albers equal area conic. And if you think back to the discussion on projections and all that, things like equal area, conic, that's telling you something about the projection itself. But the Alaska one means that it's centered on Alaska. In fact, let me just hit that. Let's hit apply. And so if you get this warning, totally fine. Okay, don't worry about it. But make sure, just hit this don't warn me again in this session, because right now we don't need to be concerned with it. When we get into geoprocessing later, I'll get into what this really means later on. And whatever you do, don't hit don't warn me again ever. Sometimes this is useful, just not right now. So I'm going to hit yes. And so you can see now it looks kind of ridiculous. The US actually looks pretty good. It's not quite as droopy, but because it's centered on Alaska, Alaska looks fantastic. Everything else is kind of curved over to the side. So that's good for Alaska, not good for everything else, right? Canada, Hawaii, contiguous USA. Read through there, use some of these things, use those clues, and you'll see how they move, how they affect what it is you're doing, right? And in fact, let's just go back to here for now. I'm going to right click and hit zoom to layer so we can see this stuff. So play around with that and hit save, again, like I haven't been doing. In fact, I'm going to put this in my, where is it? In here, documents, ArcGIS, US pop. Let's call this working. I'm not really doing anything with it. Okay, so that's saved. We're happy. You'll play around with that stuff. Now, the other thing that we need to do is fix this issue of Hawaii and Alaska being in the main data frame. And in order to do that, we're going to go to Insert and Data Frame. Okay, and so we'll add another one to our map document. Oh, good, it worked. But this again is why we save it. So you get this kind of floating empty shell that says New Data Frame, and there's nothing in it right now. The first thing I'm going to do is I want to get some kind of background on it, because as you can see, it's clear. You can see right through it. So with this new one, I'm going to right click on it, go down to Properties, I'm going to go to Frame and Background, and I can pick anything here. And remember, I think I mentioned this before too, they give you these kind of weird default things. If you see something you like, great. If you don't see something you like, just pick whatever color. I'll just do white. And you can then hit this drop down. You can change stuff. You can really mess with this. So I'll hit OK, and you can see it's no longer see-through, right? And it just makes it a little easier to see it, to figure out what it is you're working with. Okay, another thing that's important to do, apart from hitting save, is to make sure that we start naming the data frames, okay? Because it's very easy to get these things confused. In fact, I'll hit insert. I'll add another one. You can see it's new data frame 2, and it will continue to be named in that way. And so then as you're moving back and forth, changing things for your final layout, it can be quite confusing. So what I want to do is right-click on Layers. There are a few ways we can do it, but I'll just right-click on Layers and go to Properties, and go to General, and it has that name, Layers, right there. I want to change that. And I'm just going to call it Contiguous US, okay? Meaning the 48 states that actually touch. I'm pretty sure I spelled that right. And then if I hit Apply, you can see it changes that name right there. You could also add something like a description. It's not necessary here, but that can be good if you're making something that's going to be used by other people and it might not be obvious. Might be good to put in some notes right there. All right, so I'll hit OK here. This new data frame right here, I'm going to right click, go to Properties, and then in Name, I'll just put Alaska. And hit OK. And then this one, I'll right click, go to Properties, and I'm going to call it Hawaii. And because I want to respect the native peoples, I'm going to put the little glottal stop. And that's a little apostrophe thing right there that indicates a pause. That's part of the original language. So that's how you know you're cool, when you put that little apostrophe thing in there. And there, I'm going to move this guy right here. And in fact, let's right click, Properties, that one. See how I did that? I just right clicked over here as opposed to here. I'm going to go to Frame, Background, and I'll do white again and hit OK. All right, then what you can do, and this is pretty easy, pretty cool, let's save, is you can click on states, left click and hold, and just drag down here to Alaska, and it takes that exact file and puts it into this other data frame. Now it's important, you can't do this if you're in these other windows here, this list by source or any of this other stuff. So you want to be in this drawing order, and then you just left click, hold, drag, and bring it down to the next frame. What's also cool is that it maintains all of your symbology stuff that you have. So you can see this kind of pink to reddish color scheme that I have here. It kept that. And so that means for our legend, when we actually get to that point, it'll be great because we only need to have one legend. Everything will be clear. And we can just have a spot for Alaska. I can click and drag this here. I can have a little spot for Hawaii. And then I can also drag this up and zoom in a little more and adjust it. And of course, I haven't messed with the coordinate systems because really I don't want you guys to use the one I do. I want you to experiment with this stuff. But I can move this stuff, drag it so I can see everything. What you could also do is, we have this guy here. I could move that there. And again, one thing that you'll most likely have to do is with each of these, you'll have to right click, go into Properties, and change the coordinate system. But like we kind of saw, you should have 3 related but different coordinate systems that you use for each data frame, right? One specifically for the contiguous United States, one for Alaska, one specifically for Hawaii. And as I was saying, another thing we can do, we can kind of shrink those. You can play around with your final legend. Right click up here in the gray to open up my toolbar options. It's thinking, it's slow. There we go. Go to draw. There we go. Just going to move this up here, and I can do one of these rectangle guys in here that'll cover up the fact that my Mexico there ends at the southern border. We don't have the rest of Central America. You have to be kind of careful with some of this stuff when you add some of these limited other countries behind it. Also, if you want to, you could technically, because we're showing this in different places, you could leave it like that. It's really up to you. I kind of like having this. You could also, with Alaska, drag that in so we see Canada right there. But then we have this rectangle here. So if I do a legend, which you should do, so that we know what these numbers mean, we can get rid of that. I walked you guys through this before. Let's see, we'll get rid of our legend title because that's stupid. And finish real quick. But you can have the actual legend here in the middle. You can show Alaska. You can show Hawaii. There you go. Now, one thing that's very important to be aware of before I stop this short little video and let you guys play with this stuff is that you have what's called an active data frame, and then you just have the other ones, which are inactive. So notice right now, this contiguous US is bold, and Alaska and Hawaii are not, right? And so that means this one is active. And so this legend is connected to this right here. And this also means if I decide to change my mind later on, let me click on this and just change the colors. So let's say I don't really like that after all. I want to go for, I don't know, something more purpley. And I hit OK. It'll change that there, but it doesn't change these. So my legend might be completely wrong, be misleading. Need to be aware of that. Also, if I want to add, say, a scale bar or something for Alaska, but I have this contiguous US activated, I can still do insert scale bar. I can pick, I'll just randomly grab one. And so I've got that right there, but it's going to this data frame. So it would be wrong to place it here because it's a totally different scale, right? So be aware of that. And to fix that, there are a few ways to do it, but the easiest, kind of the safest way to do it is right-click on these other data frames and hit Activate. And now you notice that Alaska is bold, contiguous US is not, right? So that's the idea there. You only need to have one legend. Just make sure all of these ramps right here, these color ramps, are the same. Make sure it's consistent so we can compare this stuff in our main data frame and these little inset maps right there. Okay, so play around not only with the colors and those elements, but the coordinate system, the projection. Make this look attractive. I leave that up to you. Also, play around with the different elements here. A scale bar might be nice. It might not be necessary. I mean, we're not using it for navigation, but maybe it says since we have square miles on here, maybe that could be a beneficial thing to have. And your scale bars can be different sizes and all of that, but the unit should be the same, feet or miles or kilometers or whatever it is you use. So try to keep everything consistent, but also be aware of which of these data frames are activated. All right, and so once you're done, beautiful map, have a title, north arrow if you need it or if it's appropriate. And remember that it might not be appropriate. Have that legend in there. You can put your name somewhere in here, add those elements, export this thing as a PDF. So file, export map, and then remember to actually select PDF, not EMF for these other things, but select PDF, give it a name that makes sense to you, and upload it to the proper part for this specific assignment for Canvas. All right, folks? All right, best of luck.